We happen to be journalists who, with no planned background or understanding or intent of covering a terror attack, found ourselves in the midst of what I would call a war zone. We were live on multiple other global channels across the world talking about what was going to be India's biggest terror attack.
Today, I'm joined by the amazing Shaili Chopra. She's a highly respected Indian journalist.
I realized the problem with our stories in our world was that we weren't telling stories of women because they weren't in places, where you traditionally went searching for stories. Why should men not be a part of this conversation? They are living with women. They are raising women. They are from women. And the other part of this is also true. I tell women that you are half the world, but you raise the other half. And so we can't make exclusionary spaces.
Welcome to FounderMetrics by Vested, the podcast that delves deep into the anatomy of business triumphs and the strategies behind the commercial success. I'm your host, Ifty Nasir, founder and CEO of Vested, and I'm so excited to take you on a journey into a world of inspiring founders. So far, given I'm based in London, we've really focused on British entrepreneurs, but it's important to look further afield to take inspiration from other significant entrepreneurial startup hotspots. One such place is India, the world's fast-growing economy and fourth largest startup ecosystem on the planet. So let's take a look at what Indian entrepreneurs are doing, what are they doing right, what are they doing differently, and what can we learn from a nation catapulting itself to global market dominance. Hello and welcome back to FounderMetrics. Today I'm joined by Shaili Chopra, the highly respected Indian business journalist, author, entrepreneur, and UN generational ally. Shaili, welcome to the podcast. Do you want to just give us a little bit of a background on where you are right now in life and what you're up to?
Ifty, thanks so much. It's always wonderful to speak with you. Well, where am I in life? Well, I would say I'm starting up again. In one sense, setting up a brand new business on women's health, midlife, menopause. So that's really, at a point where I'm once again trying to do something new. But if I look back, 15 years of journalism in India's biggest broadcast media story. And then right after that, setting up and embracing digital as a platform by setting up 2 networks that focus on women and women's health. But more importantly, I think I would say I'm forever curious. So that's the common thread across all these journeys for me. Bunch of fellowships that I did in the middle, joined the Aspen Institute, went to the Stanford Fisher Family Program, learned a lot of things from a different direction, both about myself and about building things. I would say I'm in a good place of learning, but of course, a new place of setting up a business that's uniquely positioned to, find its feet again because it's focused specifically on women and women's health.
So tell me about the start of the journey. India, not always seen as progressive as some places, but you were a trailblazer as a journalist within some of the biggest TV networks in India. How did you actually manage to get into that?
I can't say it's easy. It's, it's simpler to look back at a journey, and it's very hard when you're going through it, particularly in a country where back in the day, there were very few women who took journalism. And when I use the term journalism, I'm talking about hardcore reporting on business, stock markets, scams, and even terrorism and war for that matter. So one found oneself in an all man's land and a no woman's land, trying to see if there's something to break through into. So clearly in a country that's, yes, even now I would say not progressive for women, but it's trying to change. It's been hard sort of navigating male-dominated professions. But I think a lot of it comes from ambition, which most women are mostly told to suppress as they grow. And you always think that, okay, if you're not ambitious enough, how do you even go and dream and want and desire and break through then after that? So I think a lot of that for me in wanting to enter Indian journalism came from the ambition to be somewhere where people said you can't get there. I think you try saying no to me, it's easier for me to jump into that.
But then, even within journalism, within any profession, sometimes it's luck, sometimes it's ambition and determination. I remember talking to you before about one such event, and I'm not saying it's lucky from a positive perspective, but you just happened to be outside the Taj when the terrorist attacks took place in Mumbai. Just tell us what happened there and how you then, in that environment, actually took control.
Yeah, I happened to be there at the Taj terror attack as one of the two first journalists. I was the first woman to start reporting out of there. And why I say that is because it wasn't like I just found myself there. I left my office after finishing my bulletin on the business news and said, what is going on in this city? I used the term curious about myself, and that curiosity just got me into a cab. Two of us went as colleagues across the city to figure out what really was going on at the Taj Mahal Hotel in Mumbai, and discovered that there was no other journalists there because on that evening, people had moved on to partying and nobody thought that in the middle of the week something like this would happen or something like this would happen at all, So I did find myself next to an outdoor broadcast van with a camera person who didn't know who was going to report and exactly on what. And that moment, the biggest blast that happened in the Taj, in the dome, the first grenade blast, it just went through. And we were live trying to get ourselves, we were just trying to get a hold on what was going on. And we were live at that point on our channel. By some stroke of luck, the entire stream did not break. And we were live on not just NDTV, which is the platform we were reporting on, but we were live on MSNBC. We were live on multiple other global channels across the world talking about what was going to be India's biggest terror attack. But we had no clue. We just knew that there was some sort of siege underway, and that we happened to be journalists who, with no planned background or understanding or intent of covering a terror attack, found ourselves in the midst of what I would call a war zone. I think it tested every piece of journalism I had learned, including the fact I'm a journalist. I'm supposed to have some security, some sort of anti-bombing jacket or something that saves me from all of this. But here I am, literally in one shirt.
Yeah, a bulletproof vest with press written all over the front.
Yes, and even a hard hat in camouflage colors. And I say that because, the person who asked me this question was Nick Gowing. And about 48 hours later, maybe even 72 hours later, when he landed into the place, and both of us stood outside the Bombay Stock Exchange, the iconic Bombay Stock Exchange, when it opened for the first time to trade. And he said, you are not even wearing your, wearing your security gear. And I said, what is that, by the way? And he explained to me how across his journey from London into Bombay, he was constantly being trained for reporting in the war zone. This is the stark difference, in the way we operated in India back in 2008. But that very moment was a milestone in my journey as a journalist, because it really put me in a place which I was not comfortable with, a broadcast journalist reporting on a terror attack. Second, it questioned my understanding of what journalism should be. So is it about sharing information about who is hiding inside? Is it about shoving a mic in people's faces and asking them how are they feeling when they're coming out of what seems to be, a very, very dire situation, or having lost somebody? Or is it really about reporting the facts, sharing pictures, and keeping your humanity alive and ensuring that you don't divulge something that could jeopardize either a situation or a person? So I would say that accidental arrival at that venue and becoming the first woman to report from there, or among the first two journalists to report from there, was as a moment of truth for me.
It seems like, as you say, it was a not a pinnacle, but it was a point for you in your journalism. And then, you moved on from that to end up being the founder of SheThePeople. What was it that changed for you in terms of just the straightforward journalism journey that you had worked so hard to build, both in terms of reputation, credibility, to then decide to make the move that you did to being a founder?
So I believe that, in the course of my being a journalist in the traditional way, or as you term it, straightforward journalism, I realized how telling stories isn't straightforward at all. And that's really something I discovered in television as a broadcast journalist. And I differentiate journalists from being broadcast, digital, and, media founders, because broadcast is a very different medium. It came alive during the Gulf War, and I was very much around to watch it on TV. And that's when the first dreams of watching Lise Doucette and say, can I do this? Will I get an opportunity to be somebody like her? They were sort of embedded. And then suddenly, in about a course of 2 decades or so, the idea of broadcast was beginning to become very, very non-relevant, right? And I asked myself, what's changing about things? One was, of course, the idea that you can't just tell stories in a certain way, because broadcast thrives on incidents and happenings. And stories don't necessarily always happen at the moment. There is a long tail like a comet of a story, and there is a precursor to stories. And those stories become very, very rich and real when you realize that they make connections with people. They inspire them, they move them, they shake them up. And many of those stories to me were beginning to come from just telling people stories, not position stories, not the story of the CEO, but the person behind the CEO, not the chairperson, but what got you to the chair. That kind of stuff was so rich and enriching that I asked myself, what are the stories that I feel are underrepresented? And I looked around. And the easiest place to look around is your boss's office, right? There's always a man in there. So I realized the problem with our stories in our world was that we weren't telling stories of women because they weren't in places where you wanted, where you traditionally went searching for stories. And that led me to start thinking about bringing journalism, the rising tide of digital, the drowning tide of broadcast, and just what was so passionately a part of me, but I didn't have either the capability, the money, or the guts to step out and say, I'm going to go tell stories of women, the untold stories of Indian women. That was the moment when I said yes.
So what was it about the idea? How did it become? So you saw this world of men or male dominance within the industry, I guess in many industries for that matter. And you step back, and then how did the idea of SheThePeople as a vehicle come as the answer? How did that come to pass?
Yeah, like I was sharing, if you give women a stage, they will climb onto it and take it. If you don't create one, where do they go looking for one in a world that's normalized for men to be on stage, to men to be in suits and men to be called John so-and-so, the CEO of so-and-so? You're essentially wanting a network, a platform where women would say that, listen, hey, this is mine. This is where I speak first. Now, when I started SheThePeople, a lot of women in the journalism field thought I was actually adding to the gender divide. And I tried to sit down with them over many, many coffees to understand why they felt so. And, it's interesting because media as a platform, as a space, as a sector is very gender agnostic at the start. It's only at the top when you really face the resistance and you see the male dominance. And that's the sector we'd all grown up in. And for them, it was like, it's not gender unequal at the beginning. So we shouldn't look at further dividing it. But I wanted to move out from what I would say the straitjacket of the idea of journalism and say that, listen, I'm actually building a platform where women could be CEOs, mathematicians, scientists, rocket launchers, or just the girl next door. And they should have a safe space to talk about what they do. We all say that if we want something, raise your hand. It is such a simple idea. But women are fearful of raising their hand because of conditioning over centuries. And nothing helps them break that. So setting a media space for women is not as simple as giving them, a place to showcase themselves. First, it's to unshackle them and their minds from believing that they have done something, even if they put food on the table, earned money to just make it from a single income household to a double income household, raise their sons and daughters differently. The reason for success and achievement and the definition of it in our world, that needed to change. So in that sense, SheThePeople came about with the idea of changing that very microcosm of how women see themselves, how they should see themselves in public, and how public should see themselves and celebrate them.
So how did you get other people to join? It's an initiative to get past you have to have other people running with you. How did you get past that initial onboarding of collaborators, shall we say? And how did you take it from 0 to 1?
I think it's interesting you say 0 to 1. Onwards to 100 million movement. But I want to start with the fact that I went out there to the people I met and to whatever little digital access was available back in 2014. I think it was predominantly Twitter and a little bit of Facebook. And I literally said that if you've been a person who have felt belittled and slighted because you did a lot, but nobody thought it was recognition enough, I'm looking for you. And if you want to come with me, know that this is going to be an arduous journey of first finding the women, second, making them remove their self-doubt and start speaking. Once we start speaking to them to talk about what they have truly achieved, what is success to them, and then take this story to the world, it's going to be hard. And so the first woman who raised her hand was my first colleague.
And that was?
That was a young woman called Purvi Gupta, who has since then moved on, and she now runs, she does a lot of other work in the social spaces. But there's one other person I should give credit to in a small way. She was my neighbor in Bombay. And she was a lady who had moved out from Calcutta in Bombay. She felt she was overweight, so she was very conscious of her figure. She had to live a separated life from her husband with a little girl who was all of 4. And she had to work in a stock market agency in a room full of men. When she took on all those hurdles with one decision to move from one city to another, I looked at her and said, what an amazing woman. She can do all of this. Whether or not she achieves it, it doesn't matter. But the fact that she believes she can is just a reason to go and talk to this woman and tell her story. And I get goosebumps every time I think about her. So, by the way, she became head of sales there. And I don't want to name her because I haven't sought her permission. But it's just amazing that a woman went from wanting to enter a different world, do things differently, become an advocate as well as a role model for her own little daughter, and entered a stock market space and changed things and became like the head of sales there. Kudos to such women who do this.
Absolutely. But then, as you say, so you had your initial followers or collaborators and supporters, but then so that gets you from 0 to 1. What were the main learnings in that stage? Because it takes a lot of effort. Yeah, you need supporters, but what were the initiatives? What were the things that helped you from a practical perspective?
I think from a learnings point of view, there were 3 key learnings. And I think these are learnings that I would term as leadership learnings of sort, without making them sound lofty. My first learning was that if you have left something behind, don't think hard about it. I was the face of Indian business television for many years, 9 p.m. after 9 p.m., day after day. That does give you a sense of hubris, I would say. And you keep thinking that if I get off that paddle, am I going to be okay with it? Or will I just sort of, wonder, why did I do this? Will I live a life of regret? I think I wrote that down in several places around me. Literally wrote that down. I said, you took that decision, you live with the consequences. Now focus on why you left. So that was one. I think the second was ask for help, especially from those who know you. And so I used my card of being a very famous broadcast journalist who was giving autographs now and then in Bombay to enter the rooms of the very CEOs who wanted, to be on my show. And I said, all this while you were helping yourself. We were chatting, we were getting you all this attention. Now I have a very important cause, and I'm not even going to your CSR department. I want you to come out of your room and say, I'm supporting this girl and her initiative.
Did that take a lot of courage, bravery, or was it just Shaili doing her thing?
I think they both are the same thing. It takes a lot of courage and bravery, but it's also Shaili doing her thing, right? And it was true that I would say 3 out of 25 said yes. That's not a great number if you look at the ratio.
Yeah,
right.
It's tiny. And
It
you'd
is
helped
tiny.
all these people.
Yes, because, people meet media because they are looking for publicity. People don't meet media, so they have to support them, right? And then, of course, there were many, many really admirable people who sat me down very seriously over a cup of coffee and said, why are you doing this to yourself? Who goes out there to set up a platform for women? It is such a niche idea. You are actually putting your career down the drain. And I asked myself, was I? I did come back with self-doubt sometimes. In some cases, I didn't have a courage to give them an answer because I didn't have an answer, right? Actions speak louder than words. And at that point, I only had words. So it was an interesting learning for me to come back and say, maybe you'll go back to these people again. Maybe the situation would be different. And the third and a very important lesson was, and this was the lesson I think I would say in hindsight I learned, always leave your previous opportunity at the top when you have some worth, some confidence, certainly money, so that you can put that little fuel behind you and say, okay, I'm going to get from 0 to 1 on my own. And from 1 to onwards, I'll come back to you guys for help.
So going back to the 25 that you reached out to and 3 responded, what proportion of those were men?
All of them were men. All of them were men.
All of them. So that means that even the 3 that supported you were men as well.
And, there were 3 men who I can name. I should name these 3 men. One, because your audience would know them. One is Anand Mahindra, who is India's biggest feminist male advocate that I have ever met. Other than the fact that he also always invests in ideas of the future. He was one. Second was Rajiv Anand, a young man who has run Axis Bank for years and years. And he came back to say, I will support somebody who's trying to do something different and also aligns with what seems to be an economic agenda at the bank. Third was Amitabh Kant, who was with the government, but he came for one of my initiatives and saw 500 women in a room. And I think he was kind of just puzzled as to how do 500 women even get to a room? And how do they start speaking up their mind? And they damn have businesses. Are you kidding me? That was it. Those 3 men just gave me an opportunity at that point. And that's not to say that women didn't want to give me an opportunity. But I could see that some of the women I went to had to be like men because they were occupying chairs of men and had not sort of ever done this before. They all came around eventually. But these 3 men, I always thank them for what they did.
So given what you've said about the agendas for the banks and for other organizations, when you see what's happening, certainly in the US and across the world, that change in emphasis on those who are underserved or underrepresented, how do you see that's changing in India, if at all?
I think in India, the problem is so deep-rooted as I imagine it is in the United States. But here, we don't have an option, and I'm glad that we're not exercising that, which is to unwind diversity and inclusion programs like corporate America is. And I should add that many of them by force. Here in India, people are still talking about right to nutrition in pregnancy. I mean, do you see the fundamental problem being so basic, right? Or they're talking about female infanticide, female education. That's one parcel of it. For women in the middle class who have gone beyond such issues, the challenge is how do you make sure that you go and enter the workforce, right? I believe there are some sectors that could boast 25 to 30% female early entry. But that's again not a number to dance about, because that number, sort of shrinks to 3% in top management. When you compare the United States and the rest of the world's developed countries, you'll find 45 to 50% of their female workforce is actually working. Now, if you put that in India, we're not going to be a $5 trillion economy. I think we'll be about $8 trillion overnight, because the delta is 30%. Massive, right? Yes, it's a huge opportunity. And this opportunity is something that needs to stay alive to people's ears and heads for a long time to come. We don't have the luxury or the option at the moment, and hopefully we may never have a political situation that leads us to such a situation, where we have to stop programs, where we have to start questioning whether women should return to the workforce after they've had their babies, and should they be demoted or brought at the same level, or should they be actually given an opportunity to grow? These are very basic, fundamental challenges that any country in the world today is going through. The figures show that there will be 300 years before any part of this world will see equal pay for equal work among men and women.
Ooh, what's the data? What's the data behind? Where do you get that information? What that statistic?
So the data is across, I think, between one of the UN orgs, and I literally got off a panel on with the UN EP as well as the UN Global Compact. These figures are widely published. If you go to a private sector report, it'll probably pick 137 years. But how much better does that make you feel, right? Just say. Yes, not much. So essentially, we do recognize that there is a challenge. But there is a very interesting story that underlines what's happening in some parts of the world. And I won't be surprised if in non-political ways or non-organized ways, this is seeping into India as well. There is a movement towards more conservative behavior. Political, economic, in terms of how societies should behave. People are questioning why the idea of the family, the idea of a society is crumbling, because people within these societies, individuals, are wanting individual autonomy. Whenever you look for freedoms that have not existed in the past, they're bound to bother somebody. And as that happens, we will see more and more people come out with he the people to take on she the people, because this is beginning to be explored as them versus us.
Yeah, it's a wedge. It's a classic wedge issue.
Yes. And if you go by any legitimate, normal conversation on why feminism came about, it didn't come about to bring men down. It came about to help women rise. And that fundamental theory is questioning even the women who pull women down. But we unfortunately love labels. Humans just want names for everything. And so every single label has got multiple definitions. And that is beginning to see a wave of discomfort among anyone who has to leave their territory to make space for others. You ask a lion, he's going to have the same discomfort. You ask a man, he's showing the same animal instinct. And that's the problem in our country, and our world. And in the countries that we're talking about.
Let's get back to labels, Shaili. Journalist, aspirant entrepreneur, somebody with a brilliant idea. How did you build, or how did you access the skill sets to actually be a successful entrepreneur? Because you hadn't got loads of accounting in your background or marketing expertise, etc. How did you actually go from a great idea with a totally different backstory and end up with this brilliant success? What were the levers that you had to pull within SheThePeople?
I think there were a bunch of them, and I'll give very practical answers to this. Number one was that I started out thinking I should just hire different people to do different things. And I failed in the first 3 months itself. Why? Because everybody may come with a certain talent. But back when I was starting, this talent was not democratized in a way to feed into the work I wanted to do. So it was really important for me to stop after 3 months and say, first, you learn the ropes before you expect others to deliver. Right? And it really was useful. So I needed to know my social media, which was to me some other thing at that point, right? I'm somebody else's job. The same was with accounting. I recognize that accounting should be done by accountants, but I'll be a completely foolish person running a business if I don't know how to match my balance sheet or question what should be my goods and services tax. What is the rate of tax that I am supposed to give versus somebody else and in my state or yours, right? So that was another thing. I got down to every single course I paid for online, and I called up accountants and told them, explain to me, what is this? What all do I need to know? Which space under which should I get taxed? Which should I not get under? It's like, I think lawyers and tax people are really brilliant at what they do, but they can also take you for a ride if you don't know a thing about your business. So I think it was important to get the basics of what I needed to know. And this is also true on recruitment. Go out recruiting for a startup that's never done stuff that's the usual. You're not going to find people. I was looking for hustlers, people who would understand that journalism can be more than broadcast. I was looking for people who could, record on a little phone camera as opposed to on a crew that'll take them there and make them feel like a diva. I was trying to break a lot of things at the same time. Well, when you start up, you can't be. I asked Barack Obama, when he came to India, in one of these conferences that we were reporting on, about the importance of speaking well and confidence. And I heard his answer in that room full of people, which was so basic, right? If you really believe in yourself, just get going. And trust me, there were times when I shoved this little phone in the face of Indian politicians, Indian CEOs, and they didn't flinch. What I'm trying to get at is sometimes you feel more overcome by not having that diva-like feeling, but at the end of the day, people know if somebody can take your message out there, that's all that matters, right? They'll pick it up, right? So I think there were skills that I had to learn. And even now, while I don't spend all my time doing the brass tacks, because it's obviously important for one to learn and quickly find the right talent and get into the place, but I do try and stay ahead of the curve of understanding the developments in my sector, so that at least when I hire people, they know that I know what they need to do. So these were some basic stuff that I picked early.
So tell us now, we'll come back to how you got past or came back in after that initial failure, but just give us encapsulation. What does SheThePeople provide for the world?
So SheThePeople is a one-stop network that helps you to amplify your voice, your story, and find other people to do business with. And that's how it's grown into now a 6 million large community. Yeah.
Vested is the leading ShareTech platform. What does that mean? It means we make funding rounds a dream, so you can raise with ease. Our platform helps founders secure investment, scale fast, and succeed, because companies that raise smart grow strong. So take the stress out of funding rounds and raise with confidence. For more info, search Vested.
Without the second need.
6 million large. So are they active on a daily, weekly, monthly? What's the sort of cadence of participation?
So our active monthly users, watchers, viewers are 4.5 million. And our community is deeply active through multiple social platforms and the network itself. The network is leveraged by them attending our initiatives depending on their interest levels. We don't call women to a gathering of women. We call them to a gathering of Economy 2.0. We'll call them to a gathering of women writers. We'll call them to a gathering of CEOs and executive growth. So we call them for what and who they are wanting to be. But we make safe spaces for women to get into these places. So the network is leveraged like that.
That's brilliant. And what's the business model, Shaili?
I run on multiple business models on SheThePeople. At the end of the day, we have a brilliant women's community. many of who volunteer to participate in our paid programs. What that essentially means that I'm able to go to organizations, from governments to brands to non-profits, and offer them great storytelling opportunities. They don't have a story. I may have a story that matches theirs. They may need to socialize a new product, a new research, a new report that they are trying to work on. They could tap SheThePeople and its community to get deep insights. Companies globally, whether they're Unilever to P&G to some of India's homegrown large companies like IDC, or even for that matter, venture capitalists and funds, they all would look at our community and ask us, hey, by the way, do you have 55 entrepreneurs who are working in AI? Can I find them? We help you find them. Yeah.
That's brilliant. So the sustainability of the business, now that it's been established, is there. And
it's fully profitable from the day it was born. I don't like the word sustainable over profitable when it's a woman-run business.
Now, I guess sustainability is one of those things that it will survive beyond the founders. So there's so many initiatives where the business has been set up, or the organization has been set up, but it's driven still by the founder pushing the levers, treading the mill, just pushing that effort through. What I think is really, really powerful is when leaders are able to get to a stage where even if they move away, the enterprise, the initiative, the benefit that they've brought to the world can sustain without them, because you never know when you're going to get knocked over by a bus or some other event, and that's the real opportunity. And do you feel that that's the stage that you've got with SheThePeople too now?
I would say I'm almost there. I recognize one very important factor, which has been a common thread in our conversations from the beginning, the changing tide around women and equality. I think that's the one thing that's helping, change the narrative in our worlds. If that comes down, that's what worries me the most. But structurally, I think it's really important that one builds a business for sustainability, and most importantly, sets in motions ways by which your business can give others both arms and legs to keep it into a movement, which is why I say that when we started, we were a website, then we became a network, then we became a platform. Today, we're a movement. And I think that's what helps the juggernaut keep at it.
So what was it in your gut or wherever else you get these initiatives from when you decided to change? What were the triggers that decided to change from a website to a platform to a movement? What was it in you that said we need to change? This is great. However, there's a different direction we need to take it. How did you make those decisions?
So I think, Ifty, every year, sometimes even twice a year, I ask myself, do we need to pivot on something? Is there an element here that requires us to pull back and say, let's do this differently? And that's why when we look at conversations and communication and you see the idea, all these three things are about motion. They're about a flow.
This is really interesting. So you do this intentionally. Once or twice a year, you say, right, I'm going to step back. And what do? Do you go to a retreat? How do you go about doing this?
That's
Shaili?
A good question. Sometimes I sit with a cup of tea under some sunshine. Yes, it is a bit like sitting in the park under a tree. But there are times when I literally sit down and see what's going on with the rest of the world, right? Sometimes you get a feeling about things by just some political development in a corner of Australia. I'm hypothetically saying this. It could be something as basic as that. When the idea of SheThePeople was born, I had written the word SheThePeople on a little paper napkin in 2008. But the company was born in 2014, right? And it's just weird how some things just come to you and you put them down and you're like, I'm going to get back to this because this is something that will change the world or it'll change what I'm trying to do, right? So I think it's very important to make time for pivots and make time and ask yourself, what did my users and viewers and communities applaud in the last 6 months? What did they just not relate to? And relatability to me is a bigger barometer than anything in any business that you are. If you're making sanitary napkins, you need to know how the woman is changing today. And does she really care about what you say and how you're offering your product? Whether you do content and, now I do commerce as well, in this space, the same story. You got to sit and talk to your consumer and say, what are they asking you for? Because you and I, Ifty, met 15 years ago? And haven't we changed since then, other than our friendship? We have just leapt forward in so many things. I mean, you are acquiring companies. I am building companies. I mean, there's a lot that's moving, right, about what's happening in our world.
There is, absolutely. I mean, let's just go back for a second and where you've taken SheThePeople, because I want to move on to your what's next for Shaili in a second. But you've gotten it now to a movement of 6 million predominantly ladies. Are there men within the SheThePeople movement?
Yes. I say that we are a sisterhood, and I really do calm the men who are helping women in making space for their voices and sometimes being their voices. I have, from the very beginning, and maybe call this shortcut efficiencies that one is desperate for, I have always tried to find men who can just convince other men so I don't have to do that job. And I think that's a good way to get work done. Yes, so for me, this is really important. And I, think about it. Why should men not be a part of this conversation? They are living with women. They are raising women. They are from women. The other part of this is also true. I tell women that you are half the world, but you raise the other half. And so we can't make exclusionary spaces. And so if that is going to be the case, SheThePeople is actually constantly reminding men, sometimes with tongue-in-cheek content, sometimes we poke, but sometimes even sweetly, that some things are just not okay. Just as much we remind women that patriarchy is not a male problem. 35% of our following is male.
What percentage? Sorry, tell me again.
35.
So a good third of the community.
It's a very heartening number for me.
That's brilliant. And what about the team? How big is the team now?
We're close to 25 people.
25 people, and you've got a movement of 6+ million. That's brilliant.
I should say that the average age of these people, when I remove myself from that group, is 25. So I can't thank the young generation enough for how much energy they bring to the table and how much they remind, the ones who have sort of been around longer, that we need to change even faster. And I love that pace.
So let's now move on to the next stage in Shaili's life. So you've gotten SheThePeople to a brilliant position now. It's sustainable, using my definition of the sustainable criteria. And you're moving on to a new initiative. Tell me a little bit more about that.
So, I told you when we started that I always wanted to work for women. And so my new initiative is called Gytree. Gytree is a very deeply Indian idea of the tree of life, the voice of Om, and the many aspects of what a Gytree mantra in Hindu scriptures is really about. Just one that talks about equality and embracing, the universe. That's the term. But Gytree really is a platform that's targeted at the 35+ woman who is embracing midlife, pause and menopause in all its ways. So it's a holistic health approach to navigating hormonal issues from midlife to menopause. And it came about, again, from SheThePeople. SheThePeople came across from my life as a broadcast journalist. And Gytree was birthed out of the conversations and many experiments we ran with the community at SheThePeople. Because women have needs and they need their needs fulfilled. And so today Gytree is about 15 months old, and we are doing packaged nutrition for women to solve for hormonal-led issues in midlife and menopause.
Yeah, because this is something that's often hidden away. I mean, there's a lot of cliches around men going through midlife crises and getting motorbikes and the rest of it. But the changes that happen in women are almost like just papered over or invisible. They're supposed to just handle it. And so it's interesting that you're actually bringing it to the fore and actually doing something about it. So in terms of that initiative, where are you on that at the moment?
So I set this up, less than 2 years ago. We raised a round of funds from angels. We set this up and ran a bunch of tests on the platform to see what exactly were women looking for. Were they looking for programs? Were they looking for consultations? What were the problems they were trying to solve? The very heart of this problem is that, it isn't a problem. It is a life stage. You can't solve it with a pill. It's going to be around for a decade and a half in some form or the other. So you're going to basically, be head on with your hormones now and then, and you've got to just either befriend them or navigate them or sidestep them or just say, get it over with, right? It's just one of those things. But really, the stage is very important to recognize that when you build something and you're not solving for something that's going to literally, be a magic pill, you have to solve it differently. You have to help people become aware, so you need content. You need them to be navigated with, so you need to handhold them. That's essentially creating a pool of advisory services. And then you've got to remind them.
So it's leveraging that community as well then.
Exactly. So that's right? So there's content, community, those consultations. And then the woman is like, okay, after all this, I still need something that I can just get going with. And then she's like, I want something I can buy. So you essentially offer them packaged nutrition that can support them through this. So fulfilling that spectrum to me is really owning the space of midlife and menopause. And I want to just sort of peel a layer off this conversation. These words sound lofty and they sound like, hey, this doesn't happen to me. Neither does it happen to men, nor does it happen to women. And they both want to say it doesn't happen to us, right? And I say this why to both men and women? Because one is being in denial doesn't help. Secondly, men and women both need to know what this is because, they're seeing it every day. And they just have words for it. They'll say, oh, I think you've gone wonky. I think you need therapy. I think you need to go and just, chill with your girl gang. I think you just need to go take a vacation at a spa. This is all the equivalent of saying, I don't want to be with somebody who's going through their hormones, right? And this is really our reality.
Because it just, when you say it, it just sounds so stupid. And yet I've heard these comments from friends and colleagues and others. And it is something that's almost like hidden away. It's not a problem that men want to address. It's for ladies to address. But I actually want to challenge that. I think it's actually a journey that both parties in a relationship or both halves of humanity need to be looking at how we address together.
Exactly. And, as you said, at this point, given how early we are in this conversation on the issue, I think if men can start acknowledging it and women can start addressing it, that itself will get us somewhere, The problem with all of us when we think of this area or I would say this subject is essentially the othering of the problem. And it is so deep-rooted from skin to sexual pleasure, from the need to, just have a conversation in a day, to the choices one makes, to how one raises children, to how one lives their individual lives. It's all so connected. And I don't even mean men as partners each time. I mean, they could be fathers and brothers and uncles and, or partners, people. Yeah, people in public, in offices, right? So at Gytree, we ran a survey with women in India, and the topmost voted piece was how 85% of the workplaces in the country today don't even acknowledge that this issue exists. Forget even addressing it for women. Now, the most powerful part of this isn't even menopause. It's the fact that people who are in menopause, they are people rich with experience, are possibly, if they're still in the workforce, are already in leadership positions, right? And you have zero support for them. So it just tells you, when you crib about a country that wants more women in the workforce, you are not even capable of keeping leadership talent in place because you don't create a comfortable nutrition, wellness, health, employee-friendly environment. And then you're talking about creating equality. And on the leadership count, I hear this is universal. Currently, most countries in the world are wondering where to start with the M word. And they are not able to navigate beyond just giving them an app-based program. We're happy to do that, as we do that for many others at Gytree. But, the conversation has to become far more widespread.
Yeah. And broader in terms of who's part of the conversation, because it's not just about women. It is about the environment that they're in, the others who are dependent on them or relying on them, or as you say, I mean, many ladies will be in senior positions by the time that this stage in their hormonal journeys comes to pass. And it's actually incumbent on us from a societal perspective to actually embrace it and see how we can support them such that they can carry on making the contribution that they do to our lives that they've been doing to date.
That's true. There is an interesting term that economists use, right? They call it public infrastructure. Now, we don't have gender infrastructure. We don't have economic infrastructure. And now we don't have emotional infrastructure. So think about how one peels off the idea of an urban city where you expect people to thrive. What do you expect them to thrive on, right? If you are not able to make spaces safe for women, you are not able to have workplaces that cater to women, right? This morning I was having a conversation about how we talk about these things in panel discussions in rooms full of people who are somewhat privileged. But you just literally exit that room and you realize how underprivileged you are because, on the road from Delhi to Gurgaon, I don't have a good bathroom. And I have a ride of 90 minutes. So how privileged are we really? And so these conversations are really the wraparound of why some central conversations, some specific conversations that we're trying to drive at Gytree also require multiple elbowing of things and saying, get in, this conversation is happening because this needs to be connected. We need to change the way women at workplace look at this. We need to change the way men talk about it. And we need to change the way menopause is discussed at home. But most importantly, we are trying to change all that. But at the center of it, we first want women to say, I am stuck. I want a solution. I think that is the focus of my startup. All of the rest is where I'm working on the awareness piece. I want women to start calling for help and we reaching out to them for help and helping them navigate this journey.
Vested is the best rated ShareTech platform. What does that mean? It means that we make share schemes a dream. And over 90% of our customers agree that their scheme has helped them to retain, recruit, and to lead and succeed. Because companies that share stakes share success. So get them invested by giving a slice of the pie. For more info, search Vested.
Without the second need.
I think the initiative is fantastic and I'm fully supportive. I mean, it's something that we've talked about on numerous occasions. But tell me, what are the three things that you'd want to make sure land in people's minds from a female founder perspective on this next stage of the Gytree journey that you're about to embark on?
I think first it's very important to recognize that when we say female founders, got to know what the female founders are building. Female founders building for women's solutions is a very, very important factor because one, they come from a place of knowing and lived experiences. So I'd like people to recognize that when a female founder is called a female founder and she's building for female health solutions, there is absolute merit in why she's doing it versus why a man is doing it. Second, I think it's very important for more funding to come through for these aspects. Everyone's looking for a 100x bagger. By the way, so am I, and so are the women who consume my products. They are like, give me a 100x relief plan now. And I'm saying, give me a 100x funding plan now. Absolutely. But do all businesses function like SaaS, the very sexy SaaS? No, they don't. They get sexy over a time. And this is why when somebody is trying to work in things that you haven't heard of enough, pay more attention. because these are the opportunities of tomorrow. And you will miss the bus if you don't invest in them now. Third, be out there to recognize that when businesses are being built, selling isn't everything. It's a very important part of it. But the other aspects that build the business is why that business has come up to sell in the first place. So content, advisory, consultations, awareness, community, these things truly matter. If you are a venture capitalist today, and if you have daughters, ask them what kind of brands they would want to invest in or pay for. They will say somebody who doesn't treat women badly. Oh, you're going to wonder, what brand is that, by the way? How would I even know, right? Because that's not what brands wear on their sleeve. So get to know companies who are building the right way for the future, because the future generation is not like us. They are not transactional. They will make the transaction when they believe in what you're doing and they believe you're doing the right thing in the right way. And I think those three things are truly important for me as we build Gytree, and we build products that are actually nutrition first for women, evaluated on their bodies, and show results to women in the way they are seeking results. And I think that's really relevant for me, for anybody who's watching this.
Oh, that's fantastic. Well encapsulated. I think from my perspective, firstly, what you're doing, it needs us all to get involved. I think, there's one of those adverts that I won't mention the name, but they keep reinforcing that thing, you're worth it. Absolutely. You are indeed worth it in terms of half the population being supported in that journey at that point in their journey. And I think it's important.
And my business is worth it too.
I was literally going to come into that. I think men who have the ability to appreciate and recognize this, as well as all those ladies who are already following you, need to get on board. And I think it's going to make a massive difference. I wish you every bit of luck, energy, and we'll support you as best as we can on this next stage of your journey, Shaili. I mean, thank you for joining us today. It's been a brilliant conversation. And here's to Gytree and SheThePeople.
Ifty, thanks so much. It's always a pleasure, and thanks for being such a champion of the work we've been trying to do. But most importantly, I'm really I'm delighted that you built Vested the way you have, and you're a very important spoke in the journey of every founder. So thanks so much for being someone who recognized the gap and sort of brought all of this together at Vested.
Thank you for joining us on this episode of FounderMetrics. Remember, even the biggest of ambitions are completely doable when you know what to manage and track. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to subscribe and you'll never miss another one. You can visit us on www.vested.com, where you'll find piles of additional resources, articles and exclusive content. You can also join our thriving community of entrepreneurs and founders by following us on the usual socials and YouTube. Until next time, stay inspired, stay driven and keep writing your own success story.